And now we take you over to our radio studio to join that conversation with Professor Noel Tagoe. He's live on the Super Morning Show on Joy FM, and they're talking about many things.
I'll call it for about 3 years, and then moved on to work at University College Dublin. And then from there, moved on to work at Oxford University for a while. So with University College Dublin and Oxford University, I kind of ran, so from 2001 to 2004, I was with University College Dublin, physically present. Right. But my contract ended, in fact, I resigned more formally in 2007. Because for some reason, University College Dublin wanted me to still retain a position there. So whilst I was at Oxford, I flew in every Saturday to teach executive MBA and executive programs. Partly because most of my students were working with the likes of Intel and the major multinationals who had cited their headquarters in Dublin for tax reasons.
Yes,
insofar as I was concerned. So there was quite a clamor for me to be there. But after 3 years, I got so tired, and so I was there.
So you travel every weekend for 3 years?
Well, I was fortunate. They flew me over.
From Oxford to Dublin?
Yes.
Wow.
And from my house to Terminal 1 was about 45-minute drive from Oxford. So that was in there. So I'd go very early in the morning and then come quite late at night. So that was that. And I had an opportunity to both study and teach at Oxford University, which was one of the most eye-opening stuff for me. And my focus at Oxford was primarily on philosophy and moral theology, applied to accounting and economics. That is my thesis was on why the West owed Africa trillions of dollars for the slave trade. So I was kind of arguing. If you remember, in the year 2000, there was a clamor that went by the name Jubilee 2000, for the forgiveness of debt in Africa. And I argued against forgiveness of debt in Africa because I said we do not owe any debt to be forgiven. You see, debt is an artifact of economic relationships. Now, the West finds it very interesting to deal with our economic relationship in post-colonial times. They don't go to colonial times and pre-colonial times. But slavery was firmly situated in pre-colonial times, and that there's a lot of data available because slavery was dutiable. So, every ship that left Europe into Africa, what they carried, their customs duties, customs documents, everything that they carried from Africa, it's there. So we knew the ports. And fortunately, I had the data in order to be able to work things through. So kind of was flipping between theology, which was a personal basis for slavery, but also moral philosophy, and then accounting and economics and things like that. So that was quite interesting. We could do stuff. And teaching students also at Oxford was one of the joys of my life. It was a tough job because you know that at Oxford you don't normally have lectures. It's a tutorial system, so kind of 4 students come and sit in your office or somewhere else, and you would have given them some material to look at before 72 hours before they meet you. They send you the material. You kind of gauge what they know, and you engineer a debate and a conversation between them. And if you are not prepared, they'll show you up. And things like that. So Oxford was okay, but you find out from what I've been describing in my career that I kind of flip between academia and practice. So when I'm in practice, I call myself a reflective and cerebral practitioner. When I'm in academia, I call myself an engaged and practical academic. So I moved to SEMA sometime in 2008 and still retain some connection with Oxford because I still live in Oxford, and Oxford University never lets you go anyway. That is so. I work with SEMA first as their head of accrediting programs across the world, and then moved on to become their director of research. And then in my last 7 years, I was executive director of education. And when we merged with CPAs in America. I became the executive vice president for academics, and then later for research and curriculum. And what I was responsible for, in a nutshell, was the education of 650,000 professional accountants and students across the world in 150 countries. And that's exciting for me. And it was also an opportunity for me to create something new with CIMA. So we moved our curriculum into more practical aspect. We changed the structure of the curriculum. We changed the technology that we use for the curriculum, and so on. One of the greatest joys that I'd had in more recent times was when COVID came. Most of the professional accounting bodies, in fact, the professional bodies across the world, could not get their students to write examinations because of lockdown.
Yeah.
CIMA was the only one who got their students to write examination because they could write their examinations at home.
Yeah.
And it was because of the work that we had done over there, and CIMA could recover a lot of the money that they would have lost in terms of that. So that was quite exciting for me. At the University of Nottingham, I am looking after their Africa strategy. Again, wherever I go, I carry Africa with me. And I'm also looking at how to mentor early career academics in terms of research, but also how to mentor other professors in grounding what they do in the world of practice. So that's and I get to do other things. I mean, I'm a busybody, so I get to comment on different things. But I think and then I'd say that in the work that I've done, I've met many different people. I mean, I've met Steve Jobs, I've met his nemesis, Bill Gates. I've met any and everybody in the technology industries, and then in the financial sector. I'm talking about CEOs and CFOs, etc. So if you take Vodafone, for example, Nick Reed, who's their CEO, used to be their CFO. He used to serve on my advisory panel and other things, people like that. And it was great meeting people like that, and it was great sharing with people like that and being affirmed and validated in terms of people like that. And then also to say that during my university career, I mean, Professor Ben, I remember my first residence board meeting. It was like a baptism of fire for me. Early the next morning, Professor Bennett comes to my room, Commonwealth Hall, and he says, Noel, great ideas, but you don't know how this university works. That's how it works to get your stuff done. So that was Bennett for me. The late Professor Mills taught me company law, and I must say that he's the best teacher I've ever had from all my distance, including at Oxford. I mean, education. He's the best teacher I've ever had. Wow. And he was an Accra Suffolk person. I mean, I belong to the team that is currently leading the Ghana
Olympics.
League, and and people kind of, and so there was endless debate between myself and Professor Mills about that, and so many other people, So where I am now has been just standing on the shoulders of giants in order to see far, and also to emulate them and to move beyond that. So if you like, that explains my philosophy of recognizing that I have a heritage that I cherish, and then having a heritage that I cherish, moving on to establish something and to leave a legacy that will become somebody else's heritage, and that goes on. Yeah. So that's my background.
Wow. I mean, one of the reasons why we were so excited to have this conversation is because there are too few, unfortunately, Ghanaians who have had the sort of career that you have had and achieved the sort of things that you have. And it gives you a certain perspective, since you carry Ghana with you wherever you go, and Africa with you wherever you go. So I'm really looking forward to how your experiences shape your views of what Ghana is and should be. And perhaps we should start from the economy. Yeah. Not so long ago, we had the budget read in Parliament by Oseche Mensah-Bonsu, who was sitting in for Ken Ofori-Atta, who's now the minister, somebody you know quite well. But it was interesting because it introduced the concept of recovering from COVID through taxes. Now, Winston has been looking at some of these numbers all the way through since the budget was read and, assessing the need for some of these taxes. But we're keen to hear your view.
Okay, so I think the first thing to state is that COVID was a massive disruptor. No one saw it coming, or very few people saw it coming. And it was one of the things we call a black swan event, which is widespread. You don't see it coming, and therefore you cannot prepare for it. And so let's put it in that perspective. What COVID also did was to wreck economies, wrecked supply chains, and then economic activity almost came to a halt. And so what was needed was for governments to step up to the plate and protect lives and livelihoods. Most of the earlier effort was on the protection of lives. And then most people realized that, why do you protect my life if there's no livelihood? So livelihood came into the picture. But what it did was to shift the fiscal position of many governments became worse than it used to be. But it also shifted the criteria by which we measured economic performance in terms of both growth and fiscal position. So that's, if you like, the background to what I'm going to say. So the issue then is about recovery from that. Sure. And I'd like to use a personal example of mine, if you don't, because normally what I do is take people from the known to the unknown and make a point over there. In November, I came into Ghana. I felt very ill. I went into a coma. I shout out to the University of Ghana Medical Center. Fantastic. So you met me the week before. In fact, the week after you met me at the Chartered Institute of Bankers Marketing Ghana event, I went into a coma. Into a coma.
My God.
And I was in intensive care. So it's like Ghana's economy in COVID, if you like. That's what I'll compare it to. And then when I came out of intensive care, and by the way, as I said, the guys there were fantastic. I mean, it was just a beauty, and the facilities were very good. In fact, indeed, one professor friend of mine, when he looked at how my treatment and how it had gone, said, "My goodness, I wouldn't expect to see this in Ghana." I kind of said, "This is that." But Ghana's economy during COVID would have been like me in intensive care. Once I was moved from intensive care into the ward and outside of the ward, I couldn't start doing things the way I did it, as if nothing had happened. I had to slowly build up, and I had a program that made me build up, and I'm still building up after that. So Ghana's economy now is coming out of COVID. We're not fully out of the woods yet. So it's like having moved from intensive care to the ward. Now, as I see the current budget, it is as if you're moving from intensive care to the ward, and you are being required to do to recover very fast, And whereas I have some sympathies to the fact that there has to be recovery. I think the pace of recovery that is being canvassed is very ambitious for us. And if it is very ambitious, the impact on the economy might not yield the policy objectives that are being put in place. And there are two impacts of that, two implications for that. One is that when there's a narrative of growth and economic policy impact, if you don't achieve it, it devalues future statements you make in that regard. That is number one. Number two is that it might, in my view, and that's just one view, so we'll see what happens in there. In my view, it might hinder more than help. And so I wouldn't, if I were running the economy, and thank God I'm not really, that I would have gone a bit slower in tackling that. And that is where the issue of taxes come in. Winston, you want to say something?
Yes. So you talk about, and you use the example of moving from the intensive care, and you're expected to recover faster. The government, for instance, talks about the need to stimulate economic growth because of where we have found ourselves. The government talks about the fact that we need to inject more capital into the economy to stimulate this growth we talk about. So there's the coronavirus alleviation and revitalization enterprise support scheme, which is known as Obatampa. The president has also talked about the need to, you went to the University of Ghana Medical Center, and the president says what COVID-19 has shown us is that we need to build hospitals because it got to a point in time where we're struggling for hospital space. So he wants to build hospitals in all districts that do not have hospitals, additional regional hospitals in the Western region, for instance, and in those that the newly created regions. If you look at all of these coupled with our normal expenditure, does it amount to wanting to grow so fast or recover faster than expected?
I think injecting funds into some momentum into the economy is good, but injecting it too fast is a key issue, because at the end of the day, everything you're going to do depends on funding. And one of the things that I find slightly stressful with politicians and national leaders is not managing the expectations of the electorate. So you make a promise, and I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad promise, it's just the timing and pace of it. What can the economy afford to do at that time? At the end of the day, look, there are only 4 sources of funds that are available to us. We're either borrowing or we are getting grants from people who are friendly to us. If you're getting grants, be ready to cede some of your sovereignty. That's okay.
Sure.
And thirdly, you are taxing people. Or fourthly, government itself has revenue from royalties, from dividends, and other things like that. Okay. So, but if you're going to borrow, you have to make sure that you have the capacity to repay and service the debt. I don't put too much emphasis on grants, because for me, at age 64, Ghana should have stopped relying on grants. No stories told, no excuses told, period. Because that affects the way in which the world looks at us and behaves towards us, and it affects our economic power. Look, if you pardon my language, if Trump could call us a shithole country, and many Ghanaians agreed with him, unfortunately, for I don't agree with him necessarily in terms of that, but he can afford to do that because of our relationships with him. So grants are not where I will go to. So where I will go to then will be borrowing, but funded, and not only external borrowing, internal borrowing,
okay.
But funded with, repaid with taxes and with the royalties and others we get from our natural resources. Then we're learning to stand on our feet. In the current budget, taxes seem to be one of the primary ways by which we would fund these things. Now with taxation, there are a couple of, taxation is an area that you've got to be very careful about, because if I think part of the trend now is to do taxes on consumption, whatever we call it, it's a tax on consumption.
So an indirect tax.
Yeah, tax on consumption, indirect taxes are one of the most regressive that you would have. And it's regressive because the rich pay the same proportion as the poor pay. I mean, look, you see, when it comes to contributing to national development, you have to contribute according to your ability to contribute. Okay. You see, you cannot say to a doctor, come and run an economy as if it's an economist. You cannot say to an economist, go and run a hospital as if you are a doctor. So there is that. And there is the issue of, how do we widen our tax base extra? I'll come back to that in the conversation. But then there is also the issue of what we use the money for. So there are a whole host of conversations that we need to have in Ghana about our fiscal space and so on. Okay. And that conversation is not being carried out. It's either too technical, or it is people are just talking about things they don't know about. So because of that, because we don't have the capacity to fund, we ought to go more slowly. If somebody can persuade me that we have the capacity to fund, and not necessarily through direct taxation at the moment, because that is, I mean, people have been hit by COVID already. Organizations have been hit by COVID already. There's the fragility of confidence in the economy is such that you hit people with taxes, that confidence goes down. And economics is not only a technical thing. It's what I call a socio-technical area where psychology, market psychology, and everything takes place. Once confidence drops, a whole lot of
we'll come to, when it even comes to, we'll come to how we try to revitalize enterprises, for instance, yes, the measures we put in place. But you talked about how if you are running the economy, for instance, you look at, borrowing and eventually use taxes to pay that debt. Here you have a country with a debt to GDP ratio of 76%, 291 billion public debt. Now, in the 2021 budget, we are looking at borrowing an additional 41 billion Ghana cedis. And so that automatically tells you that we're going to be increasing our debt stock. Our interest payments in excess of 30 billion, amortization around 15 billion. The challenge is the government would need money. But if you look at the budget also, since you raised that point, the COVID-19 levy is expected to generate 889 million.
Less than 1 billion.
Which is a drop in the ocean.
Great. And in the indicative period from 2021 to 2024, you're looking about almost 4 billion Ghana cedis. And for you as an accountant, that and on still in the budget, you see government indicating that they're going to be borrowing to construct the 111 hospitals. Does that suggest, for instance, that government is using this more as a tax anticipation note to borrow more? And so you're telling us that, okay, I have this tax in place, give me money, and the revenues from the tax is what I'll be using to pay this particular debt, as we have seen in Get Fund, for instance, and ESLA.
Yes, I think, well, my view is that anytime you're borrowing, you're making an assumption that you would have the inflows to back that, and the inflows is mainly cash, But you see, when I hear debates about borrowing and the criteria for assessing whether we have borrowed too much or not, I say to people that if we have to go down that route, we ought to join a conversation, more broad conversation globally, that drops the criteria, and so that the criteria recognizes that we are living in abnormal times. See, when I was in intensive care, nobody expected my vitals to perform in a particular way. When I was recovering, nobody expected my vital statistics to work in a particular way. The economy must work in that way. And there has to be conversations. And indeed, there are conversations. I mean, I've been reading stuff from Economic Commission for Africa. Vera Sangwe coming in, I don't know whether it's her own idea. She's passing it as her own idea to get to use the SDRs from IMF, special drawing rights from IMF, to be able to back more commercial borrowing from Africa at more realistic rates, etc. And the SDR acting as a risk buffer for that. At least she's begun some conversation. I mean, my own personal view is that that's lousy, but some conversation has started and we could move towards that. And others have indicated the fact that the conversation will need to go into a particular direction. But what I'm driving at is that we've got to start looking at new ways in which the world can do that. Because Ghana is not the only country that is suffering from this. Other countries are suffering from that. And this is something that we've got to build together. We've got to have an African position on that. We've got to have wider positions on that insofar as we're concerned. But if we cannot, I mean, who is chasing us to build several hospitals all at a go. Who is chasing us to do that? I mean, and mind you, I'm not saying hospitals are not good. I'm saying let's face it, according to what would have. Because if where we are going to get the money from will be such that it will impair our future growth, then let's face it.
So in effect, you're saying government says within 1 year of a start of construction, it should be completed. And that is costing us more than $1 billion. And you're saying we don't need to build all the 111 in a year. No. We space it.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'm already taking away so much from our conversation so far. We're talking to Professor Noel Tagoe. He's a practitioner of accounting and strategy. He's a philosopher, if you will, and he is most certainly an educator. We're getting some education from him today. Already, look, I've picked up two important things. First one is, who's chasing us? Right? Who's chasing us? Why don't we decide on our own pace, the one that is most comfortable and satisfactory to us as a nation, and recover at that pace? Second thing I've picked up is this a recovery? Are we going to stimulate our economy by taxing it? You know, if it's an indirect tax, tax on consumption, then are we not saying consume less? It's a question to think about. When we come back, we'll be talking even more with Professor Tagoe. We'll talk a bit about the employment situation as well as it connects to the economy. What does he think of Ghana's approach to the unemployment problem? That and more after these messages.
The cousin that hogs all the food. The relative who's always late. The brother who's always on the phone.
Picked his thoughts on taxation. Let's talk a bit more with him in a moment. First, though, let me remind you that you can do more with ABSA digital banking, and you can do it in a flash. You can make free instant money transfers, free mobile money transfers up to 100 Ghana cedis every day. You can pay bills, buy airtime, make payments, all with your ABSA vertical card, and also make cash deposits on their ATMs. Enjoy convenient banking as you stay safe with your loved ones. Remember to sanitize and wash your hands after the use of any e-banking device. ABSA cares, so stay safe. For inquiries, call or actually go to absa.com.gh. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, are you watching your favorite television program on a flat screen HD TV? Did you know that you can get it in clearer and brighter high definition quality, which is 5 times better than standard definition? Get the new HD Plus decoder today from the nearest authorized dealer or any Electrolux showroom nationwide and enjoy the feely experience on your HD TV like never before. Visit www.hdplus.com.gh or call 0242 439872 for more details.
Right, now they're back and they still have the absolute best temperature gun you can buy anywhere. I'm talking about Kingdom Books. Now, their gun has automatic data hold and auto power off features, plus a backlight LCD display, and you can set an alarm on it for a particular value, so that when it hits that value, it goes off and you know you need to take action. That and many other features are available. If you want to buy in bulk, just call our friends at Kingdom Books and Stationery on 050 140 1050 or 0244 311 955. You can also go into any of their shops across the country or just go to their head office at Osu Akweje Junction.
Well, so you know cities that don't sleep, right, Kojo? You know the cities that don't sleep.
Yes, you made Takoradi a city that doesn't sleep over the Easter, didn't you?
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But Johannesburg is the other city that doesn't sleep. Well, the heartbeat of South Africa, built by dreams and ambition, the city will invite you to experience its rich history. But Joburg is not only history, it's Amapiano, and it's the richest square mile in Africa. It's the bustling of the taxis that take you to Soweto for a chisa nyama. The city was made to wake up, shop and dance, then do it all over again. You can revel in the high life in Joburg for 5 nights from as little as 8,200, including flights, transfers and meals. Terms and conditions do apply. Make Joburg or Johannesburg your personal playground and fuel the energy of the dream chasers. For this and more deals, visit www.southafrica.net. South Africa, come journey with us. All right, Kojo, so let's continue the conversation with Professor Noel Tagoe, and we've been talking about the economy. You've talked about, you said, who's chasing us? So my understanding is that we should slow down the recovery process, right?
Yes, I think we should think. I think the thinking really is, in mathematical terms, we're thinking as if we are doing, if you like, a linear curve in terms of growth. Okay, let me shift our mind to what I call an exponential curve. An exponential curve has the behavior of a hockey stick. So it goes as if nothing is happening, and then when it reaches a critical inflection point, it shoots up. What that in policy terms means is that you kind of are looking at the basics. I don't want to use the fundamentals because it's a word that invites some ridicule, but in Ghana, I think. But you're looking at the basics and you're making sure things are there. And you're making sure there's a disciplined effort to do things. So many people would have heard from, for example, me saying that if you give someone 100 Ghana cedis and the person decides that every day he or she would improve what they had the previous day by 1%. At the end of 1 year, the 100 Ghana cedis would have turned to 3,780 cedis. And that's simply applying the laws of exponential growth. And what that means is that the key thing is discipline and consistency in doing things. And you can apply it in many areas of our lives, including in terms of national lives. So instead of me trying to do 500 today, let me build the basis of it and let it grow. That is what I'm saying. And so at the end of the period, you would have a recovery. Let's say we want a recovery in 5 years or 2 years or whatever, the time horizon is. You get the same recovery. One will be very hurtful and one will not be as hurtful. One would be more widespread in terms of it being embedded and sustainable, and that has almost everybody in the economy enjoying the fruits of it. Others will not get us into the same situation. So that is how come. I'm not saying slow down the recovery. I'm saying be smart in how you recover.
Okay. So don't be in a haste.
Yeah, you don't
now, you talked about indirect taxes, taxing consumption being regressive, and we should look at other means of growing or stimulating growth. There are those who have talked about the need to maybe, since we're in abnormal times, since the economy is in intensive care and a lot of things must change, we shouldn't think so much about how much we're borrowing, particularly the debt to GDP ratio. And if there's ever a time that we should throw away these basics, the time is now. Would you agree to that?
Well, I think so. I mean, the whole notion of GDP as a basis of measuring economic performance has been questioned, and rightly so, in terms of the economics of it. So, right way in the 60s, Robert Kennedy gave a speech which captured the essence of it. That if I produce something that I don't sell, it doesn't register as GDP. If I produce cigarettes that makes people ill, and therefore it is captured in the activities, it reflects in GDP. So right from the late 60s, that has been questioned. So have that at the back of your mind. Now, debt to GDP ratio is, debt is the numerator, GDP is the denominator. So first of all. Now, those who are giving debts, who are selling debts to us, what capacity do they have to generate debts? I mean, if we don't pay, we don't pay. If we can't pay, we can't pay. Everybody suffers. You have to take haircuts and things like that. So it is in their interest that there is a conversation about that. And in a crisis times, not only in COVID, but in fact, starting from the crisis in 1980, the liquidity crisis coming out of the various asset prices falling down, we moved to quantitative easing. Anybody who has studied economics in the 70s and 80s, when you print money, we used to call it seigniorage, and they'll tell you it is not a good thing to do. But we were innovative enough to do quantitative easing, to print money. And what we're doing with printing money is this. We're saying that we are pushing money into the economy and hoping that we'll stimulate the economy through putting in the money so that the goods and services for which the money that you kind of compare money supply with will pick up in such a way that it will rebalance. So there is that aspect to think about. So I'm saying that policymakers should get together and start thinking about these things don't matter. At the end of the day, it's people that matter. Your statistics has nothing if it's not affecting people. So I would say people have a look at that and think through that. I'm not preferring any solution now because we don't have the time to go through it, but let's do it.
I'm thinking about something you said earlier. You asked the question, who is chasing us?
Yeah.
Right? And of course, before that, you had given that example of yourself, recovering from a coma and so forth. And it struck me, if what happened to you had happened to you in Zabzugu Tatali, there would have been no hospital, equipped enough, to save you.
Yeah.
In that sense, would you not say that then something is indeed chasing us as a nation, where we really ought to be hurrying up to provide such facilities across the country, so that if something like that happens to you anywhere in Ghana, just like it would if it happened to you in the UK, anywhere in the UK, you would have the best care? Is that not what is chasing us?
No, I don't think so at all. Because, what happened to me, only a few hospitals could have dealt with it. You can't afford the kind of hospitals. So what my doctors explained to me in the UK is that you have 3 levels of hospital: primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, and then University of Ghana Medical Center, they call it a quaternary care. So it's beyond tertiary. And no country has quaternary care like that. I think that for me, you can't build hospitals like that. You build them once, in strategic location, so others move towards that. So what is chasing us? By all means, we've got to make sure we utilize the hospitals that we have now, we utilize the personnel that we have now, and so on. There was a debate that I had with people about our fetish for buildings, etc., whether it's in schools or hospitals. So I asked this, made us do a thought experiment. Which hospital would you go to? The one that is fully equipped with buildings, or the one that is not equipped but has doctors and nurses? Everybody said we'll go to the one that has doctors and nurses. I asked about schools. If you have to choose a school for your kid, the best equipment, the best places, but without nurses, without teachers.
Yeah.
Which one would you go? And they went there. What I did was to establish false dichotomies, but to stretch the point in terms of an argument. If I'm going to invest in the health service, I'll invest in the people, and I'll make us sweat what we have now as we build what we have. It is just that. I think that part of it. My MPP friends, let me just say that I still love you as people. And by the way, most of them are my friends. And then, of course, General Mosquito was my classmate.
Really?
Dr. Kwabena Donko was a very good friend of mine on the NDC side. So I'm kind of equidistant from that. But let me make a point. Sometimes the programs we announce are dictated not by the economic cycle, but by the political cycle. And the economic cycle and the political cycle do not necessarily coincide. In this particular case, I think that part of it is dictated by the political cycle. So why on earth should we build that now? I've not heard an argument that persuades me that we have the absorptive capacity to build now. Do we have the doctors? Do we have the nurses? Do we have the people who are going to be there? The culture of excellence in medical delivery, etc. We must make sure these things are there as we approach there. So it is an integrated approach. And so I'm not only saying in the health sector that is that, but an integrated approach towards that. And that is what will be more lasting.
Great. So quick one. And the bit on the debt levels, and there's a question to you. Someone wants to find out whether you think that our debt levels are being managed well. And I'll add my question quickly to this and say, should we consider also printing money?
Well, people are doing all over the place. So I think whether debt levels are managed very well or not, it depends on what you do with it. If I borrow to go and have a nice time and drink with it, that's not that's not good. If I borrow to build my ability to earn much more money, then that's good. But I have to know where to borrow, what kind of instruments are there, etc. So should we print money? Again, it will depend. You see, once you print money and they are not followed by goods and services, then you create inflationary pressure over there. But if you print and it enables you to follow it almost immediately with goods and services, then that inflationary pressure is eased, you know. And so, but my respected friend Ernest Addison should know a lot more about that than myself.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And finally, my take on the economy would be the financial sector cleanup and how it was handled. There's been concerns from many who believe this could have been done differently. Could it have been done differently?
Oh, any policy that is put in place and implemented could be done differently. And I think, so I speak to two groups of people, those who believe that it can be done differently, and those who were those who executed it, and they have an entrenched position defending that. I don't defend any position that I've had in terms of policy that have been implemented, because I say a lot done, a lot more can be done. So I'm eager to learn what I could have done better. And so I think when we talk about it could be done better, it is not because of a policy failure or the failure in execution. It is much more because we could learn better. Okay. So on that premise, let me come to the fact that I thought that it was treated more as a technical issue. I mean, I have no doubt that we ought to have done something about the banking sector. Because, you see, we didn't know many people didn't know what was going to hit us. And it could have hit us very badly. And multiply COVID into it, and we wouldn't be sitting down having this conversation. So I applaud Ernest Addison and co. for at least deciding to do that. What I found quite interesting was the way in which it was done. I thought that there could be a more human face to it, and I thought that there could also be a more innovative approach to it. So let me give an example, an analogy. So you are an organization and you are under pressure. You do one of two things. You cut costs or you increase revenue. To cut costs is easy. But if you cut costs, you might hurt your ability to generate revenue in future. And so for me, my default line is to look for revenue. It is the most difficult thing to do, but you do it. Look, I mean, if you read Kennedy's speech that he made in 1962, I think on August 28, 1962, thereabout, the one that he calls "We Choose to Go to the Moon." He said that we choose to go to the moon not because it is easy, but precisely because it is difficult. And once you tackle difficult things, it would enable you to stretch your mind and stretch other things. And the possibilities are endless in terms of that. And that is one of the things I've learned. So I will not go for the easy options, you know, in terms of policy. Go for the difficult ones. And we have the skills and the manpower in Ghana to be able to achieve that. I have no doubt about that. I've interacted with enough people in Ghana who know what to do, who know how to do it, and are looking for opportunity to do that. And that is where I would go with that, you know. So I'm not sure whether that's a satisfactory answer to Ghanaians or policymakers, but I would do something. I would have done it slightly differently.
Slightly different.
More human face to it.
Every time I think about the banking crisis, the one question that comes to my mind is, could it happen again? Based on how they handled it, could it happen again?
I think it's been traumatic enough for the banking sector that there either has to be collective amnesia for that to happen again. But with time, it could happen again if the regulatory efforts do not keep pace with changes that are happening, you know. And there are always changes, technological changes are happening, macro changes are happening, etc. And regulators have to keep pace with that. And I think what most regulators do and most policy managers do is that they regulate the past. they don't regulate the present or the future. So a crisis comes and we regulate. Take Sarbanes, Oxley, most of them are regulating the past, not the future. And I think regulators should move towards regulating the future. I think Bank of Ghana recognizes that because some of the few statements they are making now and any efforts that they're making shows that. But if you are going to regulate the future, then you've got to understand that you don't kill things. You find a way of putting, even if you put it in an induced coma and revive it later, that's more important. But I can sit here and say that, but by the way, I have managed things like that. I give you just an example.
Sure.
CIMA was under very heavy threat from China once. The Chinese government decided that they wanted to set up the Chinese equivalent of CIMA. And so they approached us to help them. Now that would have been, we were trying to expand in China at the time. That would have killed us. The solution, we said, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we got to know why they wanted to do that. There was a bit of nationalism there and things like that. But my solution was to get people to write CIMA examination in Mandarin. And people write CIMA examinations in Mandarin at the moment. None of the professional bodies have that. And it's just, I don't think there's ever any problem that cannot be solved by human beings if we put our minds to it. And I've been fortunate enough to hover around Ivy League schools and other places where you have no idea the amount of solutions that are coming. Even, if you think about computers, our own Kwabena Bonhini at Stanford University is working wonders over there. The solutions we face are not intractable. It is the will to begin to think through them and to tackle the difficult things and leave the easier bits for others to do. So I remind you, if you can, those of you who are listening, Google this guy's Kennedy's speech on "We choose to go to the moon." It is where it is at for me. And for Ghana, let's say, we choose to tackle the difficult problems and not run away from them. We cannot postpone it. We need not postpone it. And we have the capacity to address it.
Right. Well, let's talk very briefly about employment. I've been very keen to get your views on this because you are somebody who actually has worked in talent management, if you will, for many corporations. Ghana has an unemployment problem. Thing is, we don't really know the size of it. We don't have enough data to properly assess our unemployment problem. But we're trying to solve it anyway. How do you assess our attempts?
Okay, so I think that we have enough data, if you like, to calculate what the rough numbers would be. So let me start with, we know how many people go to primary school and how many people finish primary school. We know from there how many people go to JSS or JHS. Now, if you have 10 people finishing primary school and only 8 people going to JHS, that means 2 are falling out. You know that these 2 are coming into the employment market. You know the kind of skills they have. And you've got to ask yourself, have I prepared work for them or not? And you've got to then ask yourself, is the Social Security and other things picking them up as paying that? That's not this. And you can do that all the way through the education sector. So from JHS to SHS, those who fall through the cracks, what kind of skills do they have? How many of them are there? How many of them are being picked up in the different statistics that we have of payment, and so on and so forth. So that is the first line that I will take in establishing how many people are coming each year into the employment market, potential employment market. What are the skills base that they have, and how do those skills base gel with the economy, and so on. And then the second thing to do is to combine it with data from the likes of SNIT, etc., and then our tax authorities that are picking up PAYE, etc. But that one, you are looking at formal employment, not in the informal economy. I think that where we lack a lot of data is the informal economy. But I've taken the time to talk to a few people, around the motorway and other places. And they were a huge education for me. And by the way, my philosophy on education is that in every situation I cannot learn something. And I can learn anything from anybody. So I called these guys who were selling stuff. The first thing they told me was that we are not going to be here. None of us is here for about 4 years. We move on. So although you see people selling, it's not the same people. They move on. And they are the entrepreneurial talents that we have that we have not discovered. I just discovered it on this trip and a previous trip that is there. And when I talk to them, for example, about taxation, they said to me, we're happy to pay taxes. But it shouldn't be, they gave me 2 conditions or thereabout. It shouldn't be one that you lump something at the end of the month or at the end of the year. I won't pay that. That's number 1. So if you charge me every day something, then I'll pay that. The second thing that they said is that it shouldn't take my time. Because my time is in selling the thing. And among that, they said, why don't you give us an app? Almost all of them are using this thing, smartphones. That enables us to pay taxes. That is linked with our teams, it's linked with our stuff like that. And we can pay by mobile money. And so it's not that somebody is going to collect it and take the money away. You know, really, is that rocket science? And these are coming from the people themselves. That's what they are saying they want to do. And has anybody taken the time to stop and talk to those people? You know, one of the things you realize at Oxford University is that if you are a student, you're called a pupil. If you're a lecturer, you're called an official student. If you're a professor, you're called an ordinary student. You know the reason why we do that? Because you always learn. You don't care who you learn from. You know, and I think our policymakers are doing a lot of work in the imaginative area, the cerebral area, but sometimes where the rubber hits the road or the tarmac is where the people are. And so that is where you get the data. That's where you engage with them and do pilots and things like that and see how that is operating. My own personal estimation in terms of my own modeling of what the Ghana economy would look like is we are sitting on $2 billion of revenue from these people that we are throwing away. And that's where wider conversations about tax and other things will come there. So I have very little patience when I hear we must expand our tax base and we must do that with the informal economy and ask how. Is the thing. And it's the how that we have to look at. And I've canvassed one. I mean, others might have other views, and we need to come together and talk about that. So that's the second thing about employment in terms of the informal sector. What do we do with them? But if I'm taxing somebody who is standing on the road and selling, what is the basis? I mean, what is the person's stake in that economy? And what does the person get for the tax? You know, so I'm taxed very highly in the United Kingdom, but I know that there are good roads, there are good hospitals. I know that I'm also buying into a social contract that says that when people are in need, they have to be looked after. So no armed robber comes into my house. You know, what is the stake of these guys over there? You know, and you know that they are hustling, you know, to get things going back. Whenever I see them, I remember New York, Manhattan, side road hustlers who are hustling. But those people make it in life. And they point out to people who have gone out. And for most of them, unfortunately, they go out of the country. And we lose a cadre of entrepreneurial people. Because these guys, whether by design, by choice, or by compulsion, they have found themselves where they are. And they move on from there. And they point out to me what they do. So I got somebody who now moved up from the streets, and he buys wholesale and puts people on the streets. I've got people who are selling coconuts. They have places, extra. They are bottling the coconut over here. They have people who are retailing. So they've moved from the sharp end of retail on the sand into wholesale and so on. And some of them are lending money out to people and so on and so forth. Wow. Those are the kind of things that will make a dent. But we need data. We need the analysis of the data that turns the data from just data into insight. Because through insight that we are able to make policy and act on that. I'm sorry I took a long time.
No,
but
that's
I'm
all
a bit
right. That was very, very, very insightful. Thanks for that. Now, just before we move on from employment, this thing has been niggling. We keep talking about whether our educational system is producing the right product for industry. Okay, we debate it all the time. We keep hearing Senor Hossi has some views on that that became quite popular, and then caused some debate. I wonder what you think of our education system and whether indeed we are producing what industry requires.
So many things that education is able to do. I think Senyor's position was really very clear. He was articulating that of the employer perspective. The universities came out to speak. I was slightly disappointed by what the universities said because they kind of said, we are not there to train people for work. And I don't think that is right. There are many things education does. It trains good citizens, and that's a huge issue in terms of that. The moral foundations of the nation depends on education. I believe that's so. It trains critical and reflective people, so that you don't just go and a politician says something and then you're just jumping and following them. You've got to have analytic capability and so on, right from the early ages. It trains people who are articulate, who are good ambassadors of the nation, and they are a source for which we can have foreign direct investment and other things like that. But also critically, it should prepare people for jobs. And it should bridge the employability gap, what I call the employability gap. So this is what I did at CIMA when I was designing curriculum. I just asked 4 questions, really 4 simple questions. And different people gave answers to those questions. So I went to employers and asked them, what are the challenges that you face as employers in what you do? All right. Every employer faces challenges. And in fact, the whole the whole business enterprise is to overcome challenges for a profit. That's all. So once we know that, then I ask the next question: what performance do you require of your finance professionals? Mind you, it was in finance.
Yeah.
Of your finance professionals to address those challenges, because you address challenges through performance. And then the third question was, what skills and competencies and mindset do you need to perform at the level required to address the challenges? Because you need skills for that. The first 2 questions are answered mostly by employers. The next questions that come in is both by employers and academics and other people. And so you develop competency frameworks to determine what kind of competencies are there. And then your learning systems come. Because you acquire competencies, mindsets, and skills through learning. Then you ask, what learning delivery systems do you need to have in order to be able to acquire the competencies to perform at the level that is required to meet the challenges? Now, because I've drawn a line between learning and the challenges that organizations face, you cannot but address through that the employability issues and make your people fit for that. But you see, our education system, as in many other education systems, is what I call the just-in-case education system. Just-in-case education system is simply, I learn a lot of things just in case I'll need them and use them. When things are changing and the shelf life of knowledge is short, just in case doesn't work. Just in case works only for the fundamental building blocks of knowledge that you need to have, which endure. So you move from just in case to just in time learning. So you pick up the stuff that you need at the time that you need it because of perishability. And therefore, one of the things that our education system must learn to do is learn to get people to know when the knowledge is over, so they don't regurgitate past knowledge and live in that, and to know where to seek for new kind of knowledge and things like that. So at CIMA, I use the phrase learn, unlearn, relearn. So you're always learning something. When it's out of date, you unlearn that, and then you relearn something new. And it is the way in which it goes. That, for me, is how I conceive of education.
You were at CIMA in 2016, right?
Yes. I was at CIMA from 2008 to 2019.
Wonderful. So around 2016, you would have been executive vice president.
Yes, I was executive vice president.
Right. Okay. Now, at that time, CIMA did a study in the UK.
Yes.
And it concluded that school leavers in the UK lack essential workplace skills. In fact, you discovered that about more than 80% of young people require significant training before being put to work, according to about 4,000 finance professionals that
Yes.
you questioned. Now, I'm interested in this because in response to your findings, CIMA's findings, a lady called Alison Arnaud, who I think was a principal of Tower Hamlets College, she made a quote. She said, "We will mine for diamond, but the cut and polish is the responsibility of the employer." How different is that from what Legon said that you disagreed with?
No, I think that Alison, I mean, my beef with Alison was that they were not even mining for gold. that was as clear as that, you know. So that is where, I mean, the process that I described in looking at the challenges, etc., was a partnership between employers and others. So they were always talking to us. They were partnering with us in talking. And so I don't say that universities alone should do the stuff. They should partner with employers. And the good thing about once you start partnering with employers, some of the financial problems that universities face will be over because they'll give you the money to do that. And once they realize that a value conversation is taking place, you know, then they will give you something. What struck me in terms of the conversations, and indeed in many conversations in Ghana, two things struck me. One is that people held thefts that they thought you are not qualified to talk about this one. Who says nobody is qualified to talk about that one? So I maintain that we should have conversations where there are voices, not vetoes. Because if you have a veto, you will not listen. If you have voices around the table, you'll be forced to listen. One, to express yourself clearly, and two, to listen to what other people are saying. That's number one. Number two is that in Ghana, we prefer, I mean, when I've listened to various media in Ghana and also various debates, we focus on 1/4 of where the debate will go on. In terms of, we describe things, what has just happened. So there's a fish thing, for example. Everybody is talking about what has happened. And that's interesting. After a while, I lose interest in that. So you must move from, if you like, the descriptive to what I call the diagnostic. Why has it happened? And a lot of the conversations we're having in the country focuses on what has happened rather than why it has happened. Now, when you ask why it has happened, then you are moving, if you like, from the descriptive to a diagnostic, and that's where insight resides in terms of that. And then you should be able to kick it up to knowing why it has happened. What do we think will happen if we don't do anything about it, if things follow their natural course? And so you move into a predictive mode. And then you move into a prescriptive mode, which is knowing what will happen, what should we do about that? And I think that in terms of the debate on education and so on, we haven't moved into the diagnostic more fully, let alone the predictive and the prescriptive. And I think that is an area where we should move into.
We're talking to Professor Noel Tagoe. He's taught in the University of Dundee, University of Oxford. He's currently at University of Nottingham, where I studied. Great university, one of the top 100, 80 actually.
I didn't know that.
You didn't know that?
You're an alumnus of.
I lived down the road in Wollerton for.
Fantastic!
Yeah,
We're looking for African advocates for us who will bring Africa into the university and enhance the experience of African students. So I will nominate you as an ambassador.
Certainly. We'll talk about that, and I look forward to it. Okay, so we've got a lot more to learn from Professor Tagoe. I can't wait to hear his views on energy, on governance and corruption, on COVID-19 generally, and the disruption that came with it. And we'll also pick his thoughts on motivation, the youth, and football, if time will permit. First, we'll take some messages.